So, inspired medicine is what the scripture advocates as a primary option of healthcare. When that was breached, the second option of healthcare was natural medicine. In this segment, I will be outlining the natural and herbal remedies to deal with the symptoms associated with COVID-19. What is shocking is how, again, modern science confirms the effectiveness of these natural remedies. An example for that, for example, is diarrhea. When pathogens enter the digestive system, what the body does is send large volumes of fluid to flush the body. And so what we have is diarrhea. And so the person will say, I have a diarrhea problem. No, the body is just telling you that something is wrong. What you have is a pathogen invading the body. And of course, there are different types of diarrhea. But again, every natural disease that we identify or that we call a problem is really the body trying to heal, trying to protect, or trying to communicate to us what is the real root cause as to what is happening inside our body. So the big question is, what do you do if you contract COVID-19? What do you do if you contract COVID-19? And I want to say that what we have been trying to communicate and what a number of natural health practitioners have been trying to communicate is to help people to give their body what it needs, the raw material to heal itself. I don't believe herbs heal people. I believe the body heals itself. I believe that herbs are just the raw material that the body uses to heal itself. So the scripture says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. And so because no bacteria, no disease, no labels exist in the body will not send up a screen to say, hey, I'm fearful because, I've contracted the feared COVID-19. To the body, it's just like a common cold. Right? So there are no labels in the body. When you get COVID-19, what will affect you is the fear. The fear of the label is what affects most persons. In other words, if you get any disease, including COVID-19, the body doesn't know it, the body doesn't identify it by any name. So there's absolutely no reason why you should be fearful, why you should go in panic mode, which will only worsen your condition. Why? Because the body will do what it is supposed to do, and that is to heal and to protect itself. So, what do you do if you have COVID-19? I'm going to share that with you now. In Leviticus chapter 14, verse 1, and I want you to follow me carefully. Yahuwah spake unto Moshe, saying, this shall be the law. This is the principles. Another name for law there is principles. Whenever we hear the word law, basically it is the principles that govern a particular system. This is the principle, and I could read that there for, and Yahuwah spake unto Moses, saying, this shall be the principle of the leper in the day of his cleansing. He shall be brought unto the priest. So he shall be brought to the priest. So the first thing is that he needs to be diagnosed. And the priest shall go forth out of the camp, and the priest shall look, and behold, if the plague of leprosy be healed in the leper. Then the priest shall command to take for him that is to be cleansed 2 birds alive and clean, and cedar wood, and scarlet, and hyssop. So here we have the scripture giving a principle of how to deal with a contagious infection. What you don't want to do is get hung up on necessarily what was used, but what you want to do is study what was used to identify the principles behind it. All right? So what you want to do is understand the principles, because what happened is that the scripture is based on principles. Now, what happened is that principles will not change, but the application of the principle will change. Let me say that again. in the scripture, principles will not change, but application of the principles will change. So, for example, the camera that I'm using now, the principles upon which this camera operates is based on the same principles on which the eye was made. So there is nothing new under the sun. There is only new applications of existing principles. So in order to make the camera, what they did was that they studied the principle of the eye. They modified it, and hence they came up with the camera. They studied the principle of how birds fly, modified it, and they came up with aeroplane. And they modified the principles of horses to modify to create vehicles, which is why you hear terms like vehicles having so much and so much horsepower. So therefore, what we need to study here is the principles of leprosy and the principles of what was used to modify it, to apply it to our present condition. So the scripture here talks about only 3 instruments. Sounds like more, but it's only 3. So the scripture talks about 2 birds that were live and clean, and it talks about cedar wood, and it talks about scarlet, and it talks about hyssop. I want you to bear with me, because I want to share with you that the scripture is still relevant, and that the scripture gives a very, very relevant description. Not only relevant, but a very relevant and accurate description of how to deal with COVID-19. Now, I want to break down these one by one. So, one of the things that the scripture talks about is the 2 live birds being clean. And this speaks about the blood that was going to be used from the live birds. So basically, as it relates to dealing with contagious infections, there are basically 3 ingredients. The first ingredient is blood, the second ingredient is cedar, and the third ingredient is hyssop. And we're looking at the principles behind all 3 of them. And we're going to be looking at the application of all 3 of them. I want you to stay with me because it is amazing to see how Yahuwah gives accurate description for dealing with COVID-19 and how we can overcome the effects of COVID-19 and how we can do that effectively by just trusting His word, by just listening to His word, and by understanding the fact that He has not left us without a witness. And so the bird that was going to be used had to be clean and had to be free, and had to be the bird had to be clean, and the bird had to be alive. The second instrument was a cedar wood, then the scarlet, and then there was a hyssop. Now, the yarn, I'm going to look at the yarn, and as I begin to touch these, there are a lot of persons from the scientific world that will just right away begin to scoff at what I'm saying because it doesn't fall in line 100% with mainstream science. But I want you to understand that the scripture is not only a book of science, but the scripture is a book of all sciences. So it includes what we call the parasciences or the metaphysical science. So the scarlet yarn basically represents the blood. Blood is one of the 3 ingredients that are used in cleansing the leper. Now, the scarlet refers to something being red, red in color. And the scarlet in Hebrew literally means the scarlet worm. According to the Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew lexicon, the etymology of the word scarlet suggests the Coccus ilicis. Right? So it suggests a particular insect, a scaly insect that attaches itself to oak trees native to the Western Mediterranean in order to feed. So what does this bug have to do with the scarlet? Well, when a female attaches itself to an oak and dies, its dried body yields a scarlet dye. Its death produces the means of purification, a process that undoubtedly would foreshadow the Messiah that would come. Remember I said that there are three ingredients: blood, cedar, and hyssop. And as I said, a lot of persons now who are watching this will begin to turn away because I'm going into non-scientific, non-medical terminologies, but I want you to bear with me, because what I'm saying is, if the scripture has been accurate so far as it relates to dealing with contagious infection, why shouldn't we trust the scriptures 100% as it relates to getting rid of these infections? So I want you to stay with me.